Coming to you live, but not really. It is all pomp and no circumstance with Ryder Richards on LetUsThinkAboutIt.com, the amateur hour you should never tune into.
Welcome back, and to me as well, since it's been a little while. Okay, since it has been a while, let's do a quick recap. Now, a few episodes back, we explored why we want what others model for us to want. This is strange, and it's called mimetic desire. Now, we also got into how those desires lead to scapegoating or violence against others because of our pent-up excessive jealousy and anger. Now, Rene Girard, these are his ideas. His model is this scapegoating mechanism, and it functions almost cybernetically as a violent release that helps stabilize societal tensions. What happens is these tensions come from wanting and being denied. There will always be somebody who has something that we want, which is, of course, why we want it in the first place. So we're always going to be a little bit jealous, resentful, and kind of full of rage. And all that pent-up energy, that intensity, it has to go somewhere. Now, in a cybernetic system that we've talked about previously, this would kind of need a release valve, lest the entire system explode. So, attuned leaders, like somebody that's in line with the zeitgeist, they could hear, kind of like a dog whistle, this kind of shrill steam, this kind of rage, that's internal pressure that's building and about to boil over and just blow everything up. Now, effective leaders, they could channel this. They could channel the people's energies away from breaking the society by providing a scapegoat. Cathartically, kind of communally and horribly, they would burn one witch, not the whole village. So obviously this is irrational behavior that repeatedly repeats itself across all nations and times for millennia, right? But we also have to ask, if it's worked for millennia, how irrational is it? And the biggest issue here is maybe not that it's just irrational. It's also that it's unjust and unfair. And these could also be seen as kind of arguably newer concepts historically, even though they're ones that we highly privilege today. Now, okay, let's get back to it. One of the ways to solve mimetic desire and scapegoating is, of course, to just reveal the mechanism to us. Like, once we're educated and we can see this, we're less likely to participate in it. So theoretically, this explanatory model can help us prevent rampant desire's most disastrous outcomes, and perhaps we can constructively channel the toxic excesses. So last episode, we discussed Jean Genet's The Balcony through Benjamin Bratton's The Dispute Plan to Prevent Future Luxury Constitution, which is just a crazy title for a book. First, Bratton suggests that people are shaped by society. We are forced repeatedly into ruts, and these are based on how society views us. It's almost as if the image of us determines who we become. For example, if you look like a lumberjack, your intellectual curiosity will be thwarted, forcing you into behaviors like a lumberjack, and then you'll end up just becoming a lumberjack who maybe has a secret hobby of reading. So, seen through Jean Genet's play, this suggests the leaders, the authority figures, they're not in their positions due to some sort of inherent virtue that they really rose to the occasion, but instead, they are selected through two channels. One of these is the costume of authority, and the second is being shaped by society into the kind of assholes that society actually wishes to have governing them. So in the story, the authority figures visit a brothel to deal sort of pervertedly or sadomasochistically with the stress of being leaders. We just have to have this release. Now, when the revolting citizenry approaches the brothel, the cowardly leaders flee in the garb of the sex workers, leaving the sex workers to don the garb of responsibility. So when the sex workers come out upon the balcony, the citizens immediately confer authority upon them. The citizens are actually eager to relinquish decision-making to anyone, and these people are wearing the costume. The sex workers turn the brothel into the seat of power, and they continue sadomasochism, but this time as more like governmental ineptitude and bureaucracy, which really hurts people. But this is perversely, of course, what the people actually want. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put these people into power. So this gets at another much broader question, which we can talk about and might answer as well, which is, what do you do after the revolution, right? Because you're going to put new people into power, but they're going to be probably just as inept as the old leaders, and you're telling them how to behave. Do we just wipe out the new inept leaders? I mean, because we keep creating the idiots that torment us. Similarly, Jean Baudrillard asks, what do you do after the orgy? Which, of course, we covered like 30 episodes ago. Well, his answer is you just have another orgy. Because for us, it's not really about the orgy, it's signifying liberation. So what happens is we repeat our liberties to make us sure that we still have them until we're really enacting a script of liberty without actually being free. If anything, we become slaves to our freedoms, having orgies without pleasure. In this way, we're never actually free from the play itself, the narrative structure or the script here, right? We are the actors, and we're simulating prescriptive freedom. We're just changing the cast of who's in the costume. So, this is probably the longest intro ever, but it should help us as we begin our journey into this episode. And since we have been discussing desires and models and costumes, we even started out with double binds, we should also discuss the tactics employed to manipulate, overcome, and defend in this complicated game of domination and subversion. So today we're going to be looking at camouflage. Now first we're going to discuss the history of it and how it appears in nature, the military, and politicians. Then we will get into how it bleeds into society and signaling. Then in our next episode, because I chopped this one up, and yeah, we're going to discuss Benjamin Bratton's writings on the state and architecture as theater, and how all this costuming, camouflaging, and pantomiming we do, this fakery, it becomes doubly real and mentally disastrous. Part 1. Camouflage. Where we begin. You know how people tend to introduce an odd fact at the beginning of a story, or maybe a TED Talk? Maybe in sermons they can tell a lame joke, or at a valedictorian speech they define a word. Yeah, let's just imitate that and camouflage ourselves in tradition, because I don't know where else to start. So camouflage is cryptic coloration. It is a defense or tactic that organisms use to disguise their appearance, usually to blend in with their surroundings, as we all know. Now, in 1915, during World War I, the French army became the first to create a dedicated camouflage unit. The word camouflage came from the French verb meaning to make up for the stage. See how this all lines up? It's so good. Its practitioners, many of whom were artists, were known as camoufleurs. So these camoufleurs were artists on the stage of war. Now, let us also kind of consider artists through another word, which is artificers, right? As in artificial, as in art. Now, in art, often what most people claim to be good art is a style called trompe-l'oeil, where artists make paintings so lifelike they momentarily trick your brain into believing artifice, or the lie. So in this way, a good artist is a great liar. That is, a great camoufleur. Interruption, camouflage, and art. Once a lie becomes super duper real, well, you believe it. Or you so desperately want it to be true that you can actually work to create it. So what happens is that fiction, that artifice, becomes the truth. This sort of soon-to-be truth is modeled for you by the artificer, right? The artist. It can also be cleverly hidden from you, though, by the camoufleur. And yet, the impacts of it are real, and they can be very deadly. Now, Aristotle, he says, imitation is natural to man from childhood. One of his advantages over the lower animals being this, that he is the most imitative creature in the world. Okay, right? So, let's also look at Plato here for a second, and to paraphrase this very badly, Plato says that imitative arts, that is, the ones that imitate nature, this is actually one step further away from the Platonic ideal, the true form. The perfect or ideal exists kind of in another plane, like heaven, and it would have to actually be geometrically, mathematically precise. So, yeah, math is perfect, nothing else is. nature's just a degraded copy. It's all like lumpy and stuff. Now, artists copying nature are just copying a lumpy set of lies, and they're essentially wasting their time. And anyone who likes bad copies of lumpy, imperfect landscapes and rotting fruit or whatever that we can call art, they must be a complete moron. This seems for me to be the way that Plato sees things. Yet, of course, we also have guys like Picasso, right? So we've gone through Aristotle, Plato, now let's hit Picasso. He actually says, art is the lie that makes us realize the truth, at least the truth that is given to us to understand. He is declaring that the search for how to make your lies believed actually comes from a deeper understanding of the truth. It's not that we're actually seeking out ways to lie. So this takes us all the way back to Camo. Camoufleurs are seeking the essence of reality so they can better simulate it. Now, to complicate all this just a little bit more, because it's fun to do, philosophically, Nietzsche says, we have art in order not to die of the truth. Now, in that, the brutality of the truth, well, it vanquishes hope from us. Oddly enough, artifice can redirect us towards life or hope or something like that. Now, in such a way, we get into this really odd space. We enter this fussy-fuzzy paradox of obfuscation, reduction, abstraction, and escapist fantasy as a means of production. Oddly enough, this might be the highest means of production, this escapist fantasy. The greatest accomplishment is to work or to labor against lies through better lies. The artist sees through falsity in an interesting way, and in turn offers a new fictive vision, with the best sort of most calibrated deceits or revelations claiming a higher moral ground. And this is probably because the higher moral grounds survive to tell the tale, which honestly only tells you more about mimetic survival than truth and lies. Now, this is where camouflage wins over something like authenticity, truth, freedom, etc. Right? Camouflage appears as the kind of clothes or the costume, as that authority figure that you know that's spouting what you expect to hear. Hope and the great return. Now, the camouflage artist, the social artificer, they're mimicking the actions of the politicians before them while amplifying the current mimetic desires of the people. And you can see this trumpet as somehow virtuous, right? But of course, the trumpet's only playing you back to you. Part 2. 3 ways to hide. Camouflage via nature has 3 types with 3 functions. Now that can sound complicated, but don't worry, I'm going to repeat these and give examples, and by the end you're just going to be rattling them off without thinking about it. There are 3 main purposes of camouflage. This is dissemble, predation, and hiding, right? Dissemble is to falsely fit in or to be parasitic. Predation is to get close so you can kill something. And hiding is to avoid notice altogether, which is the most common one we think about. Now, there's 3 ways or techniques that this kind of stuff can happen. The first 2 are from Thayer's law, which is blending and dazzling. Blending, hiding again, right? And dazzling, confusion through contrast. The third one is a little different. It's obfuscating. So this is misdirection, overwrought display, or maybe even just squirting a cloud of ink out of your butt. It's like a smoke screen with ink from your butt. So anyway, let's take a walk real quickly through each one of these, looking at nature, the military, and a politician. First, let's cover blending or hiding. This kind of most easily thought of as like camouflage that's worn by hunters or military ghillie suits. The most common understanding really is to mimic your surroundings, to sort of marginally hide yourself, allowing you to blend. We tend to think of hiding as a defensive strategy for survival. We think of things like a stick bug or certain frogs or iguanas, seahorses even, and chameleons that appear as plants so as not to be eaten by predators. Now, a rabbit doesn't really look like grass though, right? Instead, it disguises its form through what is called counter shading. Rabbits have a brown back and a white belly. When the sun hits the top, it reads as visually lighter, while the undershadow darkens the white belly. This creates an overall flat effect, So you don't see a rabbit-like form rolling around out there. Like you don't see the form in shadow. You see an overall beige, formless nothing. Your eyes see by contrast, and you just don't catch the contrast. All that to be said, nature's pretty cool. Now, in the military in 1915, the camoufleurs initially hid tanks and equipment by craftily mimicking nature. They would do things like hiding snipers in what appeared to be logs, or they'd make cannons disguised as shrubs, right? They even disguised entire towns and encampments, and they made certain areas look bombed already so they wouldn't get bombed. Now, in politics, what does this look like, right? This is hiding to avoid conflict, or it's to be able to position yourself. This can be called dissembling. So, appearing to fit in for survival, while perhaps having an alternative agenda from the appearance. Yeah, that's kind of scary, right? My first thought on this is Obama, who, despite passing gay marriage and appearing to be the consummate Democratic president, he somehow increased drone strikes and deported more immigrants, 3.2 million, than Bush, who only deported 2 million, and then Trump, over his 4 years, only deported 800,000. This is strange, right? Because the numbers don't align with the kind of hope and change progressive language of the campaign. All this was sort of wrapped in Ivy League intellectual confidence, and it was kind of a perfect means of blending or hiding within the party while actually increasing militarization and deportation, which were, of course, classically Republican promises. Now, let's move on to Dazzle. Everyone's favorite camo has to be Dazzle, right? Just because of the name. But also, it's because it does the opposite of blending. It's more fun. In the animal kingdom, Dazzle is the most used by snakes, giraffes, and zebras. It is high contrast camo, such as stark stripes, which confuse your overall shape. So optically, your eyes see edges, right? But it has trouble when there's too many edges. Interestingly, this shift of contrast works on facial recognition software. So, yay, surveillance capitalism. The best way to fool software is actually to paint your face like a juggalo. Yeah, that's right. The people who are fans of the band Insane Clown Posse, because the dark stripe across the jaw, it somehow reads as a shadow, which makes the surveillance software read your face as somehow like squished, like a shrunken head. It's very strange. So anyway, Dazzle ends up being used by the Navy on ships and even airplanes, and it looks wild. It looks kind of like the guy who paints striped pylons was given some acid and told to paint a whole ship. It's pretty crazy. Now, artists will say that it's art inspired through something like Cubism, where the harsh lines and shading break apart a singular mass into chunks. And while this kind of pretends depth, it actually kind of flattens the entire shape out. It's really weird. So here's the deal, though. Why does this, what seems like an attention-getting device, actually work? Well, one of the ways it does is by disrupting the ship that's camouflaged in Dazzle. It's hard to accurately range find or determine direction because we're used to seeing one huge mass. Hence, torpedoes are more likely to fail in their targeting. Even if they're off by 1%, that's enough. Now, in the political realm, let's say that Trump is kind of an easy enough dazzler, but let's talk about him more next as an obfuscator. Let's try instead someone like a dazzler like AOC, right? There's really so much action going on that you don't always know where to begin or where to get involved here. And how about guys like Boris Johnson or Emmanuel Macron or Justin Trudeau? These are all just names that were brought up to me. There's something about appearing strong, but somehow being evasive and slippery, where the form just really won't solidify. But equally, it's so active, vibratory, that you can't stop trying to figure it out. Overall, it's just disorienting. Finally, let's get to obfuscation. This is our third one, right? The last one, which is really kind of like dissembling and dazzling at the same time, but it's a little bit different. In nature, there's animals like, of course, the squid or the skunk, right, who obfuscate and annoy as a defense in order to survive. But a little more obfuscatory is the frilled lizard, who looks like he's kind of put on an Elizabethan collar or something when he gets worked up. And perhaps this is just to scare off the plebes, who knows? But we should also think about things like the anglerfish, right? Like, what the heck is this? This is a bit of dazzle with a bit of obfuscation and a whole lot of predation going on there. Now, in politics, if we turn and look at somebody like Trump, while he definitely dazzles like any good reality television disaster should, he also spins and wags the dog. In December 2016, I just looked this up. He was tweeting about Boeing being overpriced while he was bringing up a nuclear arms race, saying that he doesn't need daily briefings from anybody. He was screwing up talks with China, and the whole time he is pointing to immigration, yet he still wouldn't release his taxes. So this is funny because this seems to be Dazzle, but it also works as obfuscation, a kind of cloud. He's flooding the field. Because, of course, while nuclear war is being discussed and things are on the edge with China, who really cares about his taxes? So this type of obfuscation, it's inflationary and disingenuous, of course, and that's what turns it into Camo. And speaking of inflation, the military had this entire unit, this ghost army. And this was in the 1940s, and they were dedicated to running behind enemy lines in Nazi Germany. And what they do is inflate these forms that looked like tanks. And they'd sort of lay out canvases and stuff that looked like roads or tents. So what would happen is this Nazi scouting plane would fly by, it'd fly overhead, and they'd look down and they'd go, "Oh, Scheitze," right? and they assumed that we had snuck an entire army in behind them. But of course, when they returned, there would be nothing there. Oh, mind fuckery. So anyway, those are the three types of camouflage. Now, one key point I have not driven home here in all of this is that camouflage is typically thought of as defensive, but it is very often offensive. So while we consider something like hiding or bullshit to really manifest from like, oh, well, this person is just scared and we should just perceive them as childish tactics, and think of these kind of things as relatively harmless, what they actually do in their appearing to be harmless is they provide proximity from which to, you can kind of tolerate a parasitic action. And this creates a blind spot later for predation to come in, right? So we can get into all this much later, because for now, I've got a story for you. Interlude, a dumb story. Because repetition helps concepts stick, let's make up a dumb story, make it sticky. Now, to dissemble is to be false, to endear yourself with someone unlike you. Now, this is, of course, spycraft or a courtesan's trades. It's just basic mimicry. Now, you can fit in to either collect a paycheck or make your life easier. Now, this isn't always for predation. Sometimes it's just parasitic, and sometimes you just don't know what else to do with yourself, right? But what happens here if we combine all these tactics? You can both dissemble and blend by pretending to be, say, a macho man wearing a leather vest. You can dazzle people with the throaty roar of your mighty motorcycle. But unfortunately, you need to obfuscate when asked questions about the size of your engine. I mean, what the hell is a CC anyway, and why do you need thousands of them? And while you might delay, maybe you can say something like, "It's the kind of engine that gets me laid." But these people, they might press you, because now they all really kind of want one of these engines that can get you laid. So your best bet for obfuscation is really not to answer the question, but to mimic a skunk. So maybe you should fart a couple times, then burp a whole lot. Perhaps mention China while you're burping, and then be sure to eat a lot of beef jerky. This is key. Otherwise, they're going to smell your fear. And here's the whole thing. We must ask, oh crafty pseudo-man, what is your goal, your prey or predation, as it were? Now, was this for the babes, the free beer, or just for the water cooler talk on Monday? Part 3. Mimicking Mimicry. Okay, this is where we finally get into the philosophy. But also I'm going to give you some real world examples, so, don't get too worked up about it. Mimicry. Okay. Once it was blending with nature. Now this has become mimicry of the mimicker. So there becomes a pantomime of the mime in which the actor refuses to be silent. Now, on one level, we have seen a change since guys like Reagan and rap music arrived on the scene. The obvious actor is no longer the faker, but now the player of the game. Or maybe it actually all happened way before that, right? As good old Shakespeare said, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women are merely players." And by this acceptance, the artificial, once only acceptable on stage, is applauded everywhere. It's accepted, and distinction draws thin. The costume and the act are real in the sense that they have entered reality and have been dissimulated from the image form into the simulation itself. Now, what if, in a reversal, the best actors have no artifice, no parody or pantomime, only a genuine and boring character that we actually want on repeat? More Keanu Reeves, por favor. What if, as Camus says, no artist ever expressed more than one thing under different aspects? That is, what if the true artists only have one desire that they monotonously repeat? Oh, geez, right? This throws a kink in the art world. It makes sense that when they attempt to actually deviate, to be, quote, creative or try on a new costume, it becomes very apparent and they become false. In this case, art would not really be about creativity as everyone says it is, or even reinvention of the self. It's just about staying the course, even if that course is a thief or a jokester. Meanwhile, the player actor has no content. There's nothing there, right? There is no monotony. They're just desire, and they change their costume at will or simply maintain their previous desires beneath new camouflage. The difficulty in all of this is we, evolutionarily evolved as we are, we look to aesthetics as purveyors of truth or warning. So what you see tells you what to expect. Our reliance on appearance offers some form of stability to us. Okay, let's get into a real-world example. Once upon a time, when a man wore camo, or a woman, and it could be jacket or pants, whatever, you wore it into town, you knew that they had been out hunting that morning and hadn't had time to change yet. It was just really a utilitarian tool that aided them in their task, which could arguably be said to derive from survival, even if it was killing, and at least a desire to blend with nature, right? Even if this was for the sake of expedited predation. But today, camo is seen a lot in the city. So its in-town purpose is naturally reversed, right? It doesn't blend, camouflage, or hide you. Instead, it is worn to stand out. You wear camo now as war paint. It actually signals your allegiance to gun ownership. It is a brand. The political right and aggression, maybe against lefty progressivism, all those things are what camo means. To adopt a symbol of confusion, camouflage, made for dissembling and hiding, as a primary demarcating symbol to establish your side of a political binary. You know what we stand for? Confusion. This is bizarre, right? But it's also, we need to remember, co-opted from in the field military practices and military gear, which goes back to point is the civilian rights alignment with military values, right? Which remains very strong. And this increasing need for civilians to enact or become somehow militaristic. And we need to talk about that more next episode, but keep that in mind. For now, let's get back to camo in the city. If you wanted to pretend inclusion to the right, to being a real man, to pass as one who maintains traditional values such as gender roles correlating to sex, or maybe it's recognizing the role of some necessary brutality and authority, enforcing compliance because of common sense. Well, how are you going to fake this? Well, you only need to camouflage yourself in camouflage. It's just so silly. And in such a way, the reversal of utility. We took camo that was used to blend with nature, and we moved it into symbolic signaling. It's now camo to promote gun support and traditional manliness. Of course, now those values aligned with some version of violence presents dazzle, right? So we've turned camo into dazzle as threat. And this goes back into wearing, brightly colored camo in town. Now, all of this is a form of deterrence at this point. Dazzle as deterrence. Don't engage with me, parasite. I am a predator. And yet, camo, just as swiftly, can become a means of dissembling and obfuscating. I mean, all it takes is a lefty photographer or journalist to just don the garb. Instant passcode, and they're in. They have gained access. So now we have to protect against that. But even on a lesser level, wearing camo can mean leave me alone. it still acts as a threat. It can still mean, I just got done hunting. And this is where it gets weird. Maybe I'm an oddly progressive lefty. You don't really know anymore. And this is where this entire episode is going, right here. This ever-tightening, densely packed spiral of signals and motivations in which we attempt to parse out our place in the world. The signals are all conflicting. So what do people actually desire? Are they only pretending? Are they subverting? Are they dissembling just to get close to me? And what if they don't even know what they're doing? What if they're just mimetically donning, like mimetic desire? They're just donning the most convenient camouflage. Genet's play, The Balcony, suggests all people are sort of angry programmed puppets who take comfort in enacting and receiving torment. We're basically just shaping each other to these roles. Yet, of course, none of us really seem to want this to be true, that we intentionally choose idiot sadist leaders because we're enacting reality television. We want the suffering. It's tough to believe that we're dissimulating media into the real, and yet, of course, we've done it at least twice with presidents. Now, this is Baudrillard's prescriptive plot that we dumbly follow. We're confusing symbols for meaning, and we're reenacting a degraded pantomime. It is also Bratton's dissimulation of these dumbly reflexive ideas into reality which we've never actually thought about, even though we claim to have thought about them. And we should also mention the seduction by aesthetics into ideology, which is, of course, Walter Benjamin's warning that we are sliding into fascism by superficial aesthetics. However, the power of aesthetics is, at the end of the day, hardwired into us by nature to warn, to tempt, and to hide. It helps to propagate us forward as a species. Our imitative capacity, our ability to camouflage and mimetically align, this suggests that we're not simply shaped into a single role, no matter how socially predicated, but that we can adopt many strategies to evade, dissemble, and shock. Yes, of course, perhaps we wear the enforced costume, but this is merely a tactic. These tactics, I'm going to argue, are a means to establish space, distance, this space, this gap. Even if it's just a minimal distance, is a means to seek or establish some sort of fractional notion of authenticity, to find ourselves. Let's actually flip this and use their Aristotelian conception, the capacity for change, even though it begins shallowly. And of course, shallowly means at the surface, which means aesthetically. And we're back to camouflage. Okay, thank you all so much. No long, drawn-out outro today. We're going to continue on this kind of dissimulated confusion of multiple tactics next time. We're going to be considering the state and architecture as military proxies all through Benjamin Bratton again. So, yeah, that'll be good times for sure. But as usual, if you enjoyed the episode, please like, rate, review, and definitely share with a friend. And of course, if you want to contribute, that would be super duper cool. I kind of need it now. You can do that for me at letusthinkaboutit.com. Until next time, be a bit more dangerous. Thank you.